Hello everyone, my name is Jeff Murrin, here to continue our discussion of the Iliad, specifically the Robert Fagles translation. And in this video I want to focus on book 19, which is titled The Champion Arms for Battle. Okay, so that doesn't leave a lot to the imagination. We are going to see Achilles gearing up for battle. If you remember, when we last discussed book 18, Thetis had gone to Hephaestus and had Hephaestus develop for him or forge for him new armor specifically for Achilles. And that beautiful discussion, or that beautiful description of specifically the shield that Hephaestus forges, poetry in and of itself, the world and all of the ideas of the world and all its dichotomies were depicted there. And so we're going to have her returning the armor to Achilles. We're going to have Achilles addressing the people and addressing Agamemnon. We are going to have Agamemnon performing a sort of ritual sacrifice. We are going to hear some good advice from Odysseus. We are going to see Achilles disregard that advice. We are going to see Achilles get ready for war, and we're going to hear from Briseis herself. She gets to speak because right now she's only been spoken of and discussed by men, and we're going to get to hear some of her own viewpoints of things, which I think is interesting. And we are also going to hear some horses speak. Why not? All right, so let's jump right in. Let's read some things and let's talk about them, beginning about a couple lines into the very beginning on page 488. It says, Thetis sped Hephaestus' gifts to the ships. She found her beloved son lying face down, embracing Patroclus' body, sobbing, wailing, and round him crowded troops of mourning comrades. And the glistening goddess moved among them now, seized Achilles' hand and urged him, spoke his name. My child, leave your friend to lie there dead. We must, though it breaks our hearts. The will of the gods has crushed him once and for all. But here, Achilles, accept this glorious armor. Look, a gift from the god of fire, burnished bright, finer than any mortal has ever borne across his back. All right? So she comes and delivers the armor directly to Achilles. And if I remember, I was mentioning the same thing, a very similar thing happens with Aeneas in the Aeneid, but I believe, if memory serves correctly, he's on the field, Aeneas is, and just happens to look and go, oh my gosh, there's some armor for me to use. And it was sort of just left there for him to find. This one is hand delivered to Achilles. All right. He says, Achilles does, about line, let's say 28, now by heaven I'll arm and go to war. But all the while my blood runs cold with fear. Menoetius' fighting son, the carrion blowflies will settle into his wounds, gouged deep by the bronze. Worms will breed and seethe, defile the man's corpse, his life ripped out, his flesh may rot to nothing. So his concern is, if I go and fight during this whole time, without burying yet Patroclus, his body's going to rot away. He won't get the burial that he deserves. All right. So Thetis then, a couple lines after that, says, I'll find a way to protect him from those swarms. Okay. I'll protect and preserve his body. The vicious flies that devour men who fall in battle. He could lie there dead till a year has run its course and his flesh will still stand firm, even fresher than now. So go and call the Argive warriors to the muster. Renounce your rage at the proud commander Agamemnon, then arm for battle quickly. Don your fighting power. So what she will do is she will offer up some way to preserve Patroclus' body so that Achilles does not concern himself with that anymore, and he can head on to battle and fight the fight that he needs to fight. All right. He addresses the men and Agamemnon, Achilles does on the next page, 490, about line, let's say 63, somewhere in there. It says, Agamemnon, was it better for both of us, after all, for you and me to rage at each other, raked by anguish, consumed by heartsick strife, all for a young girl? If only Artemis had cut her down at the ships with one quick shaft that day I destroyed Lyrnessus, chose her as my prize. How many fewer friends had gnawed the dust of the wide world brought down by enemy hands while I raged on and on? All right. Better? Yes, it was better. But for Hector and Hector's Trojans, it was better that I raged in war, but it wasn't better for us. It wasn't better for the Argives. It wasn't better for the Greeks. It was better for the Trojans. All right? He says, not for the Argives. For years to come, I think, they will remember the feud that flared between us both. Enough. Let bygones be bygones. Done is done. Despite my anguish, I will beat it down, the fury mounting inside me, down by force. All right? So I'm going to let that go. I'm going to let that go because really that only served our opposition. It didn't serve us at all. All right? Agamemnon, though, it's interesting, I find this. This is about line 100 on the next page. He says, Agamemnon says, but I am not to blame. Zeus and fate and the fury stalking through the night, they are the ones who drove that savage madness in my heart. So it's interesting that he is not going to take the blame. He's going to say, the gods turned my heart. It's kind of like, you know, whenever Pharaoh wouldn't let the Israelites out of Egypt, and it was like God had turned his heart cold, all right? It's that same kind of thing. It's not I who did wrong, but the gods who worked within me, all right? It's interesting as well because it seems that these guys are willing to take as much glory as they can when something goes right, but when something goes wrong, it's the gods that do wrong within them, okay? I think that's an interesting point that we might want to keep, you know, in our minds here. It says, that day in assembly when I seized Achilles' pride on my own authority, true, but what could I do? A god impels all things to their fulfillment, okay? So it's like I had no choice. A god made me do that, and I'm powerless against a god. So they're prepping for battle, they're getting ready, okay, and we hear some thoughts from Odysseus. Odysseus the tactician, Odysseus the wise one, Odysseus the one who's really good with words, who is known to be the cleverest of them all. Now it's interesting here, I think, because what we are going to see, to me it seems, is that Odysseus is like Troy's Polydamas, and Achilles is like their Hector, okay? So we've got wise words coming from Odysseus, but headstrong passion and rage out of Achilles, and he doesn't really want to listen to the good advice that Odysseus gives, all right? But Odysseus' advice begins on the bottom of page 493, all right? We will see it's that last section there, let's say about line 185, somewhere in there. It says, but Odysseus, fine at tactics, answered firmly, not so quickly, brave as you are, godlike Achilles. Achaea's troops are hungry. Don't drive them against Troy to fight the Trojans. It's no quick skirmish shaping once the massed formations of men begin to clash, with a god breathing fury in both sides at once. No, command them now to take their food and wine. By the fast ships, a shoulder's strength and nerve. No fighter can battle all day long, cut and thrust till the sun goes down if he's starved for food, okay? We got to get these guys nourishment. They got to have fuel if they're going to fight in this battle. We can't just go straight into the battle. That's not a wise way to handle things, all right? Even though this courage may blaze up for combat, his limbs will turn to lead before he knows it. Thrust and hunger will overtake him quickly. His knees will cave in as the man struggles on. But the one who takes his fill of food and wine before he grapples enemies full force, dawn to dusk, the heart in his chest keeps pounding fresh with courage, nor do his legs give out till the break of battle. So come, dismiss your ranks, have them take their meal. As for the gifts, let King of Agamemnon have lot over them, haul our muster, on and on and on. Okay? So he's saying these guys need to be ready for battle, not just with armor, but also with what's inside them. take care of the outside and take care of the inside, because these are fighting machines and you need to fuel the machines. However, look on page 495. A little bitty section there about line 251, 253, 254. Achilles says, you talk of food? Like, how can I think of food at a time like this? All right. I have no taste for food. What I really crave is slaughter and blood and the choking groans of men. Okay. That's what fuels me right now. Okay. So Achilles is like, hey man, I don't want to wait. I don't want to do this. I want to get at it now. I am fueled by rage and rage alone. All right. We see again on just about line 263, Zeus's scales make another appearance, or at least a mention here. It says, now fighting men will sicken of battle quickly. The more dead husks the bronze strews on the ground, the sparser the harvest then. When Zeus Almighty tips his scales and the tide of battle turns, the great steward on high who rules our mortal wars. We want to be ready when that happens. When the tide turns, whatever that may be, we want to be able to forge ahead, or be ready to push back. We see Agamemnon on page 496, fulfilling a certain sacrifice and rite and ritual, and offer up a prayer. The prayer begins in the bottom 3 lines on page 496. He says, Zeus, be my witness first, the highest, best of gods, the earth, the sun, and furies stalking the world below to wreak revenge on the dead who broke their oaths. I swear I never laid a hand on the girl Briseis. I never forced her to serve my lust in bed or perform some other task. Briseis remained untouched within my tents. True, if a word of what I say is falsely sworn, may the gods deal out such a blows to me, such agonies as they deal out to the men who break sworn oaths and take their names in vain. All right? So I didn't touch Briseis. I know that it's this thing that's been going on between Achilles and me. I know that it is a difficult thing and a touchy situation, or a touchy topic, but I didn't go there. I didn't do anything. So don't hold that against me if that is something that will alter your perception of the Greeks as we go into battle. Achilles, skipping on to that last section at the bottom of page 497, we see Briseis. She speaks for herself. She sees Patroclus on the ground, and she has a lot of tender views or memories of Patroclus. He apparently treated her with a lot of respect. And of course, these women have been stolen. Chryseis and Briseis were stolen. They were property. They were bargaining chips. And we see that Patroclus did not treat her and see her the way that a lot of the other people did. If you'll see at the bottom there, it says, and so Briseis returned, like golden Aphrodite. But when she saw Patroclus lying torn by the bronze, she flung herself on his body, gave a piercing cry, and with both hands clawing deep at her breast, her soft throat and lovely face, she sobbed. A woman like a goddess in her grief. Patroclus, dearest joy of my heart, my harrowed, broken heart. I left you alive that day I left those shelters. Now I come back to find you fallen, captain of armies. So grief gives way to grief. My life, one endless sorrow. The husband whom my father and noble mother gave me, I saw him torn by the sharp bronze before our city. And my 3 brothers, a single mother bore us. My brothers, how I loved you. You all went down to death on the same day. But you, Patroclus, you would not let me weep. Not when the swift Achilles cut my husband down. Not when he plundered the lordly Mynes city. Not even weep. No, again and again, you vowed you'd make me godlike Achilles' lawful wedded wife. You said you would sail me west in your ships, home to Phthia, and there with the Myrmidons hold my marriage feast. So now I mourn your death. I will never stop. You were always kind. So it's almost, I get the sense, if we can look at this now with our viewpoint, it's like Patroclus was wanting to make it right however he could make it right, given the circumstances of which Briseis was now part of the Myrmidon clan, if you will. All right, let's you know, your family was taken down. You were spared as a woman, but then you were taken as a woman, as a trophy, so to speak. But how in the world can we possibly make this right? I'll do whatever I can. And she seems to appreciate it, given the circumstances, all right? But on page 500, we will see, about 4 lines in, Achilles won't eat, but Athena comes in and it says she instilled some nectar and sweet ambrosia deep in Achilles' chest, so the stabbing pains of hunger could not sap his knees. All right, so she gives him what he needs so he can have the fuel to fight forward. All right, I want you to take a look at these epic similes we see in here as he's prepping for battle. About line 422, let's say. Just check this out. It says, thick and fast as the snow comes swirling down from Zeus, frozen sharp when the north wind, born in heaven, blasts it on. So massed, so dense, the glistening burnished helmet shone, streaming out of the ships and shields with jutting bosses, breastplates welded front and back, and the long ashen spears. The glory of armor lit the skies, and the whole earth laughed, rippling under the glitter of bronze, thunder resounding under trampling feet of armies. And in their midst, the brilliant Achilles began to arm for battle. A sound of grinding came from the fighter's teeth. His eyes blazed forth in searing points of fire. Unbearable grief came surging through his heart, and now, bursting with rage against the men of Troy, he donned Hephaestus' gifts, magnificent armor, the god of fire, forged with all his labor. All right, so, oh man, we get to see just how massive and how beautiful and how important all this is. I'm going to skip about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. It says, then hoisted the massive shield, flashing far and wide like a full round moon, and gleaming bright as the light that reaches sailors out to sea, the flare of a watchfire burning strong in a lonely sheepfold up some mountain slope, when the gale winds hurl the crew that fights against them far over the fish-swarming sea, far from loved ones. So the gleam from Achilles' well-wrought blazoned shield shot up and hit the skies. Okay, so it's like this great light that even sailors can see when they're out at night on the waters. We see also on page 501 he hoists his sword, and this is something that is very important because we see this a lot, that he's going to hold up this sword that is so heavy and so mighty that only Achilles can do it. We'll see this type of thing in all of these. Odysseus's bow, I think I've mentioned this before, he was the only one who could pull it back until later his son Telemachus does it, and then we know, Telemachus now has raised up to the level of his father, and he has now the ability to fight alongside his father and perhaps even take on the duties of Ithaca after his father has retired or passes or whatever. Okay, it says there about 5 lines down, and then last Achilles drew his father's spear from its socket and weighed heavy, tough. No other Achaean fighter could heft that shaft. Only Achilles had the skill to wield it well. I think I said it was a sword. It was a spear. I misspoke. Okay. Anyway, that same type of thing happens. All right. So now we're going to get to the last little bit here, where the horses speak. All right. Remember those immortal horses I mentioned in the previous video? All right. Here we see them again. About line 473, he says, Rowan Beauty and Charger, illustrious foals of Lightfoot, he's speaking to the horses. Try hard, do better this time. Bring your charioteer back home alive to his waiting Argive comrades once we're through with fighting. Don't leave Achilles there on the battlefield as you left Patroclus, dead. All right? And Rowan Beauty, the horse with flashing hooves, spoke up from under the yoke, bowing his head low so his full mane came streaming down the yoke pads, down along the yoke to sweep the ground. The white-armed goddess Hera gave him a voice. All right, I want you to remember that because I have something to say here in a minute. Yes, We will save your life this time too, Master mighty Achilles, but the day of death already hovers near. And we are not to blame, but a great God is. All right? Always the God to blame, okay? And the strong force of fate, not through our want of speed or any lack of care. Did the Trojans strip the armor off Patroclus' back. It was all that matchless god, sleek-haired Leto's son. He killed him among the champions and handed Hector the glory. Our team could race with a rush of the west wind, the strongest swifted blast on earth, men say. Still, you are doomed to die by force, Achilles, cut down by a deathless god and mortal man. All right, skipping a couple lines, he says, why, Rowan Beauty, why prophesy my doom? Don't waste your breath. I know. Well, I know I am destined to die here. Far from my dear father, far from mother. But all the same, I will never stop till I drive the Trojans to their bloody fill of war. All right? I know I'm going to die. I know this is how I go out, but I will not stop until I take them down. And of course, to me, this brings up the story from the Old Testament, Book of Numbers, I believe chapter 22, the story of Balaam's Balaam's donkey, where Balaam's donkey speaks out. An angel causes the donkey to speak, and the donkey asks, why are you whipping me? And the response is, because you made me look like a fool. All right, you made me look like an ass, if you will. All right, and so this idea of these equine beasts speaking is not just a Greek mythological thing. It is something within the Judeo-Christian stories as well. We have Balaam and his talking donkey. Anyway, I'm going to leave those things there for you. This book 19. Please read book 20, annotate, have some thoughts all your own, and meet me back here and I will give you some of mine for book 20. And until then, and as always, I want to wish you happy reading.